this is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 350 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by INdigital as well as Rapid Deploy, but this episode is an INdigital exclusive, and I am excited. I am really excited. Again, thank you to patrons as always for everything. I appreciate everything that you do, and also for all of you who watch and listen and support. Thank you so much. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without all of you, so thank you so very much. We're going to jump right in. Usually I have a story to tell, or I have some other something, whatever. No, we're going to jump right in because, well, you'll see why here in just a moment. So my guest today is Mike, and he is one of the systems infrastructure specialists at INdigital. Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, good. How about you?
I am doing all right. Now, for those who are listening and watching, as I said, I'm excited about this because, dude, I've been trying to get you on a freaking episode forever. And I think we were at one of the buildings. This is when, again, for those who are watching and listening, when I was working with INdigital, this is one of my former coworkers. And I don't remember where you were sitting. I walked by and we were kind of talking and stuff. And I said, I need to get you on an episode because of the stuff that we were talking about. I said, this sounds very interesting. And I remember you saying, it's probably not as interesting as you think. My ass, because we were talking before we started and it was already right off the bat like, okay, I want to go. So welcome, man, and thank you so much. Finally, we're going to do this, and I'm very excited and honored to have you here because you have like 200 years worth of experience in public safety now.
Seems like it. Definitely seems like it at times.
So let's go back. Let's go way back and start with your intro into public safety, because it sounds like you had like a radio at home or something like that. Like, fill us in.
Well, I'm going to give away my age because I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. So my dad was in the Air Force, and when he got back from the Air Force, we grew up in a Northeast Indiana, small town, Wolf Lake in Northeast Indiana. So about 300 people maybe. So anyway, when Dad got back from the Air Force, he was approached by other members of the volunteer fire department to be on the fire department, which he thought that'd be kind of fun to do. So he joined. Shortly thereafter, my mom joined what was called the Ladies Auxiliary. Their job was to support the firefighters when they're on runs and other things. But in addition to that, there were 3 houses in town that actually were wired up to the fire station, base station radio with a remote radio on their kitchen table. And our house was one of those. There were 3 of them in town. So yes, for about the first 5 years that I can recall from the middle 60s, we had a big radio on our kitchen table that we sat around for dinner and whatnot. It looked like the big radio you see in the background of the Andy Griffith show in the office there. That's what I had on our kitchen table. Now, we're talking about the days way before 911. There wasn't 911. There wasn't central dispatch. At the time, I don't even think the sheriff's department had a radio. So if the guys were out on a call and they needed help from another department, they would call back, and one of the ladies, my mom or the other 2, would answer them and then call whoever they needed to call, whether it was the sheriff, whether it was another fire department. So, but that radio was on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was covered pretty much 24 hours a day. If we were going to go out of town, we'd let the other 2 ladies know we were going to leave in town so that at least somebody was around. and that was kind of like my first intro into dispatch. Period. I think we talked about the way you called the fire department back in the day.
Mhm.
You had to dial a 7-digit number that would create a conference call, and then all the guys that were on the fire department, their home phones would ring a constant ring. It was their home phones. There was actually about half a dozen businesses in town. So when you dialed the fire department number, you would cause that phone to ring a continuous ring. You knew it was a fire number, and you picked up the phone and found out where the problem was, and responded to the station. And then, of course, the first guy into the station had to hit the siren, because if you weren't around the telephone, there's not pagers. So the only way to get a hold of if you were outside was if you heard the siren, and you wrote down on the chalkboard where the fire was, and or ambulance call or whatever it was. We actually had an ambulance service too. And so the next guy got to the station, if you were already gone, knew where the fire was, and onward and upward after that. So anyway,
Oh man. So I was gonna ask. So then, what was it like for you growing up? Like you said, you remember it for as long as you remember. You remembered that being there, but was it just like constant radio traffic? Or here's one thing, you have your parents that tell you don't touch that button or don't touch that or not.
oh yeah.
Did you ever play with it? Did you ever?
No, I knew better.
Oh,
But I paid attention to how they did stuff. So later on, when I ended up joining the fire department when I was 16. So, the radio stuff was pretty familiar with me. It was just kind of the natural thing to do.
Mhm.
I forgot where I was going to go with this.
Well, as a
Oh, the radio. Yeah,
Yeah.
the radio would be a little bit noisy at times, because there was actually an ambulance service in Chicago on that same frequency who transmitted from the Sears Tower. So it wasn't uncommon on a clear night to suddenly wake up and hear ambulance 42, a man down, blah, blah, blah. But the radio was left on because if other departments were out, they could actually call
right.
our department, and somebody would wake up and go answer the radio. And if it was needed for mutual aid or something, then they'd turn around and they'd dial the conference number to wake all the other firemen up and go. I mean, it was,
Dang,
for its day, it was pretty good.
man. So, okay, let's there's a friend of mine. He's a director out of South Carolina. I believe is Charleston out there. His name is Jim Lake, and he has a similar story growing up where his dad was the chief, and he remembers dispatching as like a kid and and sending people out and stuff. So yeah, oh man, that
Well, and I've actually had to dispatch the fire department to my own house when we moved out. Well, my baby sister was born. She was a brittle diabetic.
Mhm.
So there's 10 years difference between me and her. She passed away a couple years ago, but that's another story. Anyway, back in the 70s, they had no idea about diabetes. So everything was new, trial and error. And she would sometimes get sick when I was the only one home babysitting. So it happened frequently where I would just have to dial the fire number, make the phone ring so that I could tell them, hey, I need the ambulance, come pick up my sister, and then we'd take off to Fort Wayne.
Wow.
So at a young age, I did actually know how to do a little bit of dispatching.
Yeah. So yeah, you were doing this early on and all. And so let's go to, you're 16 years old now. You joined the fire department. What the hell is that even like as a 16-year-old? Like I'm thinking about my 16-year-old and what he does now. Like he's of course got school, but he's designing and building things on his computer or just hanging out listening to music. Your ass was working for the fire department at 16. So what is that like for you at 16 going out and just in general, what was that like?
Well, at the cadet program they had at 16, we were supposed to be kind of the gophers. You weren't supposed to be put into places of much danger, but we did a lot of firefighting back in the day because you had to. There just wasn't anybody else to do it. It just seemed natural to me. My dad had been on the fire department. I'd spent fair amount of time at the fire station, off and on. I Back when we lived in town, we were only about a block from the fire station, so it was pretty close by. Um, it just seemed natural. Um, in the 70s, they also started the EMS program, the Emergency Medical Services program in Indiana. My dad was one of the first basic life EMTs that got trained. And just a very short time later, just a couple years later, my mom also became an EMT. So they both ran on the ambulance, which was still being dispatched the way the fire department had been up until, like I said, it was sometime in the 80s, I think, when they finally got a paging system.
Mhm.
Then when I turned 18, then I became an EMT. And there was the summer after I had graduated high school, the contractor I worked for, the 70s was bad for everybody. I was laid off. So there for a while, it was my mom and I making all the ambulance runs, especially through the week when everybody else is at work. And the joke was, oh, here comes Cole's ambulance service.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Dang, man. So, holy crap. Okay, so cadet style, 16, you're doing
Mhm.
a lot of, firefighting stuff, or as much as you could at that time and
Right.
what they let you do.
Mhm.
And at 18, you become an EMT as well. So now, okay, so when I started dispatching, I was 19. And it's not I guess I don't know. I guess I think about some of my I guess my eldest kid, my eldest son is 21, and I think about what it was like for him 18 and 19, and by that age, I already had him. His mom and I already had him, and, I'm managing a store, she's managing a store, and then, we ended up splitting up and stuff, but I ended up going to Florida, and I'm working in dispatch at 19 and taking, all kinds of calls and stuff, and you being out there at the same age, I guess it's way different thinking about my kids and the types of jobs. I mean, I guess situations you end up having to grow up fast and do grown up things pretty fast. And so being an EMT now, what is that like? Especially if people are saying, "Oh, here comes Cole's ambulance." So there's a lot of stuff that you're probably doing, and especially seeing like
Mhm.
how are you able to just, like, compute and take all of that in?
Being around it, I didn't really know much of any different.
Mhm,
Didn't really think about it till later on. Um, my dad had joined the police reserves in the mid 70s, back before they were actually deputized marshals. They actually had what they called the civil defense police.
mhm,
And he was one of the first reserves for that, because his intention was, when he got back from the service, he wanted to be a state trooper. But unfortunately, the visual requirements they had at that time, without glasses, kept him out. So this was another way that he could kind of fulfill that, and he enjoyed it for a lot of years. And then it kind of went by the wayside. Um, when I turned 18, I actually joined the Alabama Police Reserves, because it became the Marshals posse at that time, and that was right after they had lowered the age to be a police officer to 18. And myself and Tom Locke, who happened to be the son of the marshal, he was 19, and we were like some of the youngest police officers in the state. In fact, when Tom went to the academy, he
mhm.
was the youngest person to go through the police academy of Plainfield at the time, because like I said, it had just only been, I think, that year that you could actually become a police officer at 18. Couldn't buy the gun. I couldn't even buy the bullets, but I could carry
That that's pretty
it.
funny. That's like the argument that I've heard. I haven't heard in a long time, but there was an argument that I had heard once where, people would say, you can be 18 to give your life for service in the military and everything,
Mhm.
and be responsible enough to do that, but you can't have a beer until you're 21. So that's funny. It's just I don't know why it made me think of that, because you saying, you couldn't buy the gun or the bullets, but you could carry it.
Exactly.
You could be an officer. So then, damn. Okay, so you've been through every discipline of public safety, man.
Yeah, overall, I've been on every side of the radio, the phone, the to the all. So I think that's helped me a lot as I've progressed on through. I married a gal from LaGrange,
Mhm.
and in 1982 we decided to move to LaGrange. So we did move back to her hometown,
Mhm.
and I wanted to be a full-time police officer. That was kind of what I thought, or I had thought about being a full-time firefighter, but at the time there wasn't a lot of availability for that unless you like wanted to live in Fort Wayne, and I didn't want to live in Fort Wayne. So a job opening came up for the LaGrange County Sheriff's Department in the jail. Now we're back to Mayberry again, because the town of LaGrange is like 2,000 people at this time.
Okay.
The jail, if you filled the drunk tank, could hold 19 people. The whole jail.
Oh man.
And they had one jailer. No, I'm not talking about one per shift. There was one jailer, and that was me.
Oh, dude.
So
Dang.
after I got the job and I had been through my training on being a jailer, that's when I found out that, well, you're also the backup dispatcher. I go, what? He said, yeah. There were 4 dispatchers, the first, second, third shift, and then there was a one that rotated that covered the days off of the other ones.
Mhm.
So there really wasn't, if somebody went on vacation, there wasn't anybody to cover radio. So I was the one that was supposed to do that. If somebody was sick, had vacation or whatever, and I go, okay. And my first time of sitting radio, and you almost have to know this guy to actually appreciate it. He's chief deputy at the time was Herb Bergman.
Mhm.
Big, tall. He had a Southern Florida draw to him because he lived for many years in Florida. But his exact words were to me, pointed to the phone. He said, "That's the phone." Pointed to the radio, says, "That's the radio. Don't F up." And that was my training.
Perfect.
Now,
Oh, man.
granted, back in the day, again, we're talking the pre 911. There was no 911.
Right.
We dispatched for the LaGrange Fire Department. There was a line that it was still ringing all their phones, but there was a line on the dispatch phone, or dispatch phone, so you can answer it, and then dispatch the fire department. And we dispatched 3 ambulance, well, 4 if you count Strobe, but you had to call them on the phone. But you dispatched 3 ambulances, and there was usually a sheriff's deputy and a state trooper on, and that was pretty much it. Town of Wilkeville had a part-time marshal. Town of Topeka had a part-time marshal, old Red Haggard, but you never heard anything from Red. He just took care of stuff. They called his house. They never called the sheriff's office if they needed him. And the town of LaGrange had 2 full-time police officers, but there's as much coverage you get with just 2 guys. So, and there wasn't as much of the stuff that goes on today.
Right.
If I dispatched a serious call, maybe every other shift, the most serious thing might be a personal injury accident, which that's pretty serious, but things just didn't happen like they are today. I mean, I still listen to the scanner up here, and it just flabbergasts me how things have changed so much. It's like it's a constant go, 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 kind of like it was when I went to Fort Wayne, which I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there. But there was one point that I ended up being in dispatch full time for LaGrange. And again, that was by accident as well. I was a silly young person and was out on the dunes, the Indiana dunes in the summertime with my wife and enjoying a great day, and thought of putting sunscreen on everything but my feet. So I got laid up with severe sunburn of the feet and couldn't walk in the jail.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens that a dispatcher quit. The third shift dispatcher left kind of abruptly, and they were needing somebody to come in and cover. And I said, well, if you don't mind me putting my feet on the desk, I can dispatch with my feet up. And that's how I ended up being full-time dispatch at LaGrange County.
What the hell? What are the odds?
I'm telling you, the truth is stranger than fiction at times. So I did that again. Like I said, overall, I worked at the sheriff's department from 82 to 84. And of course, you know that public safety jobs never paid much. Well, in rural counties, they really didn't pay much.
I bet.
When I got the jail job, I was making $10,115 a year.
Wow.
When I went to dispatch, I got a $300 raise. $10,415.
Dang.
And you work 6 days on and 2 days off.
What? How many
Yeah.
hours?
It was a lot. I don't know. It was 6 days on, 2 days off. Yeah, it was long.
I would hope the cost of living then at least did it balance out?
Well, it was just barely above the food stamp line, I think. Because that's just the way it was. And they've really improved a lot
Right.
in the last several years. But back then they didn't think much of it, for the wages. So I had actually left and went to work for a company here in town. It was Sealed Power Company. Was there for a couple of years, and then they told us, oh well, everybody that just got hired in the last 2 years, you're gone. So I went back and kind of begged if I could come back to the sheriff's department, and I didn't have to beg. They said, oh, please come now. Can you start today?
We need you.
Okay. Yeah. So I worked again for 2 more years there at the sheriff's department. And one of the things I did was I wanted to learn.
Right.
There's the phone, there's the radio, don't screw up. It didn't really seem to go very far for me. So I would visit other agencies just to see how they did things. I went to Elkhart County. I think I even went to Kosciuszko County just to see how they did things. But I happened to find out that you could actually take a tour of the dispatch center in Fort Wayne. So I called and said, hey, can I come down and see how this all works? So I did. They gave me a tour of the place. And before I left, the gal that was sitting at the front desk says, hey, you interested in a job here? And I go, nah, I don't want to move to Fort Wayne. There's no way.
Yeah.
And she says, oh no, they've changed it. You don't have to move down here. You can stay where you're at and drive down here. And then she wrote down what the salary was. And it was like, holy crap. It was way more than I was making in LaGrange County.
Right.
So I said, well, let me think about it. Well, I did apply. And Randy Rapel was actually the director at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny because I went in for the interview, and I don't think I ever had an interview. It was like 2 old public safety guys just talking to each other about fire and EMS and
war story.
War stories.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, I'll let you know. And a couple of days later, I said, you're hired. Dang. So I worked down there. Now that was a culture shock, and I don't mean it in the way it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I told you that in LaGrange there wasn't a lot going on, but when it happened, and it was really hectic.
Right.
I learned very quickly in Fort Wayne that it was hectic all the time. I didn't realize how hectic it was and how important training, radio discipline, phone discipline, you get first told about it, you go, yeah, we got to do it only because the bosses want you to. Well, there's a big reason behind that. So that when the boring stuff's going on and you're doing it the same way, when the exciting stuff happens or the intense stuff happens, you don't miss a beat.
Right.
And I think that gets lost today for some folks. I know just listening to my local one up here, I don't know that they appreciate that as much as we learned how to appreciate it when I was dispatching in Fort Wayne. So, and again, just kind of the transition. They had 911 in Fort Wayne, but there was no location information, no phone numbers, no nothing. It was straight line rang, you picked it up, and that's all you had was a voice. So you had to learn how to get the information out of the folks, where stuff was at. There wasn't any computer aided dispatch. There was a big map on a rolling drum. There was we call it the running file, that you could take a street address, walk over to it, find that street, pull it out, find the 100 block and flip it up, and it would tell you the fire zone that it was.
Yes.
And give you the first piece of equipment that's supposed to leave out of that for fire and what police district it was. And then for the fire,
You're taking
Yeah.
it back.
They had to look all that stuff up.
Yeah,
And
we had a huge map as well. I mean, we had CAD and we had other things, but we had a map for our ESNs, emergency service numbers, and it would go into whatever cross streets, and
mhm,
if it didn't do it automatically, or if we wanted to double check, you just go into the map and like follow it until you get
mhm,
into the one area, and it's like, oh, it's 326, and then you look, and yeah, it would say EMS, fire, what type of response, or whichever who would come.
right.
So I feel you. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, like I said, back in the day, we didn't even have the CAD system to compare
Mhm,
it with. This was all strictly you wrote it down on a card, and you also there wasn't a lot of reference materials.
mhm,
You had your own map book, and then we had what we call a dumb book, and it was usually a book about that thick
mhm.
of all your own information that you've accumulated, numbers to call, divisions, agencies.
There was no
Uh,
Rolodex, right? It
no,
it
because
was
if because
your own
because
Rolodex.
right, because if you had one in there, it wouldn't last more than a couple of weeks because it would just get tore up from use. Everybody trying to use it. Plus, if you had multiple things going on at the same time, you know, couldn't all be at the Rolodex at the same time.
What about like your records? Because before we went to like a computer type software for our record stuff, we had a thick book that we would flip open and go down like, okay, it's raise records next up for no preference, or for preference, I mean, and then if there's no preference, then we had two different lists that we
Mhm.
go through and then rotate all of them. Did you have something like that
No,
with
it
records?
was kind of a fortunate thing because Fort Wayne contracted their towing.
Oh, okay.
So there was Kelly Wrecker on the north side and Allen County Towing on the south side, and their dispatcher actually had a radio in their dispatch office. So
Oh,
they were on the police channel with us. So if I needed a tow truck, tow truck one to go, blah blah blah, and they'd say tow truck one clear, and then they'd send the wrecker.
that's
So
pretty
that
awesome.
was nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was nice.
it saves a lot of time to do it that way instead of put
Right.
on hold or go to for us, our NCIC running records and all the other stuff, license and plates. In Michigan, it was called lean. So
Hmm.
we would tell one of the officers would say, "Go to lean and stand by," and you always knew when they would just click that they were pissed off that they have to be lean and stand by. And
Hmm.
sometimes they would send a message and they'd say, "Are you effing with me, man?" I'm like, "No, dude. Like, you have no idea how many calls there are going in here right now. Plus, I got to get your wrecker. I mean,
Hmm.
I can give you the phone number and you can call them really quick and give me the information." And then they'd say, "No, I'll wait." I'm like, "Okay, well, be patient with me." There's a
Well,
lot of things going on.
and in those days, the way we were set up was there were four VHF channels.
Mhm.
Channel one was what you would refer to as lean. It was the info channel.
Yeah,
If it was anything other than getting the control number timeout or more information on your exact call, they went over there. That's where they ran their plates and all that stuff. And
yeah.
then channel two is the south half of the city of Fort Wayne. Channel three was the north half of the city of Fort Wayne, and channel four was the detective bureau and car to car traffic. Two guys want to talk to each other, they would go through the dispatches. Uh, 42, I'd like clearance to 31 on channel four, and you would just say 31 channel four, and they'd go over there. It was really nice discipline.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of stuff was all done. The plate running and warrant checks and stuff like that was all done on that channel. And then we had a fire dispatcher and a supervisor for the minimum manpower was five. The schedule was set up so there were six people in a room, and the sixth person was strictly 911 and giving other people breaks or whatever needs to be done is kind of the fill in. Or
Yeah.
if you had the sixth person and somebody wanted to take a PTO day, then that's how you accomplished it.
Oh,
Otherwise you couldn't take time off. If
right.
we didn't have minimum manpower, you couldn't take it off. I don't
So
know how many people they got now. The last time I was up to Allen County, I was helping your brother on something,
yeah.
and and it's this huge room, and I'm remembering back to the small little room we had in the basement, um, that
Yeah.
you couldn't leave no matter what. I actually dispatched a full go to the city county building because we could see smoke in one of the cameras in the hallway outside of dispatch.
Oh, no way.
And we didn't leave. We couldn't leave.
That is crazy right there.
It ended up being a ballast right next to the camera that actually burned a ballast out of the light, but we didn't know because and when you opened up the door and looked out there was a little bit of a haze, but we just closed the door and said, okay, come help, boys.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that basement area. So when I first started working with INdigital, I myself and Lori, we were over there training all of their dispatchers on their call handling equipment, as well as their texting and all that other stuff. At that time, their center was still down in the basement, and they had different, spots split up and everything. They were just switching and cutting over to everything that was up on I think the sixth floor now is, maybe, I don't know, that
And
somewhere.
they still had the big glass wall between the county and the city.
They actually ended up taking the glass out. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you saw how big that was.
Mhm.
That was after they remodeled it. The original room was about a quarter of that because they took out our locker room area, they took out the front office area to expand it out towards the hallway to have that much room you had there. We were in a very small area, which is also leads to another funny story. It was just before I left. They were remodeling that, so they moved us out to old Fire Station 13 at Coliseum in Parnell, and we were actually they revamped what was the old bunk room for the fire station with some tables and countertops to dispatch out of. We had a mobile radio sitting in front of us and a telephone, and the 911. Of course, it was computerized by then, but it was a PC that set up on a shelf behind where you were at. So all you had was just basically the keyboard, and you could see the screen. And that was our dispatch center. It was not fun.
It doesn't sound like it. What's crazy is that you talk about how if you were fully staffed for like that shift, there was six. And when I went over there, and we were training and stuff, we I remember there were 80 consoles and about 24 on at a time. So to hear you talk about that and think about what it was like when I was over there training their dispatchers and call takers on the equipment and such, a lot has changed.
Yeah, I wish I had pictures of the old center because it for its day it was good sized,
Yeah.
and we were really pretty close together. We could have conversations, but just enough. It was kind of in a more of an L shape or a J shape because it went straight down to one side, and then there was a little corner extra console that you could use, but it would interfere with everybody because you're right on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then there was a little bit of space. Then there was the two fire consoles, the main one, and then it kind of made the other end, the very end of a J was the secondary one, and then the supervisor sat straight behind that, so they could kind of see everything, and you could hear everything that was going on without much trouble. And like I said, the last time I was up there, you could stand up and yell. I don't think anybody could hear you on the other side of the room.
Holy cow.
It's big up there.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And so, okay, for you specifically then, being in dispatch and all, when you go over there, like, do you remember any of your early calls that you had taken, or even, some that, have kind of stuck with you? Because there's a lot of years of dispatching there.
Yeah, I actually was digging through my desk here recently. I found some old cassettes that I was given of some calls of that I either got accommodated for or were just things for me to have, so I could remember them or whatever. I'd gotten a couple of accommodations for break-ins in progress. We had one. It was one of my first ones. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit because we were talking about off air here.
Yeah.
That I've kind of seen the whole progression. When I started in Fort Wayne City, again, there wasn't anything other than just a voice on the other end of the line. And Judy Parasot was one of my trainers. She had taken a 911 call, And all we could hear was this woman just getting the snot beat out of her. And in fact, I think even Judy says on the recording, she actually says, this woman's getting the shit beat out of her, and I have no idea where she's at. Well, that was one of the things they used to try to push to get the enhanced 911 so that we could get location information. Because that I don't even remember the outcome of that particular call, but it was frustrating because you could hear someone was just getting wailed on pretty hard, woman screaming and carrying on, but wasn't nothing we could do about it.
No location. Jeez.
Yep. So then it went from that to, and of course these were all just landlines. That's the only 911 calls that we had because cell phones were just starting. There wasn't 911 for cell phones. And then we got where they put a little box in there that we could get a phone number that we could actually look up on a reverse directory to see where it was at. To later on actually getting similar call screens that would give you the name, address. I'm not sure if it did the ESN stuff yet or not, but eventually did. And then, of course, when cellular 911 started out, it was only for the state police posts. They just put it in there. And then, of course, the cell phones propagated and got busier. The state police go, I don't know that we really need to do all of them. So that's when it went back to the local PSAPs end. But yeah, I've seen the whole progression. It's from no 911 through what we got now, that's even changing. I can't wait for the new location information that's supposedly coming out in the newer versions once the carriers get it all covered. So, I have to agree, if you can call for an Uber and he can pull up within 20 feet of you, then 911 should know where you're at too.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and there's so much with that people ask that all the time. Like, how come they can find me, but you guys can't find me? Why is it so hard? It's like, well, the networks are different. Theirs isn't a private network the way this one is, and there's so much else that goes into it, privacy wise.
Right. It's well, plus it's the back end of the cellular network stuff too, because you're talking about GPS locations going out over the internet. That's one thing. But then when the actual call gets sent through the carrier's network, they have to be able to harness that information as well. And, since I've started INdigital, I've been seeing things where that's coming. We're just, sounds like to me, I don't know if it's true or not, it's still waiting on the carriers. Carriers got to upgrade their stuff because I think we're ready for it if I understand the stuff that I've heard over the years here.
Yeah. And so then I have to ask then, because you've gone through this entire cycle, what was it like for you, for all of you then? Because I've only heard about this. And when cell phones start coming in, see, my thing was when VoIP was coming in. When VoIP calls were coming in, was that voice over internet protocol. And I won't say the company's names, but a lot of them, we would get phone calls and people would say, or sometimes you would just hear them screaming, and you've got people heading out to this specific address because it's on the screen, and it would say on their VoIP as the classification of call that was coming in, and then you'd finally get somebody on the line and say, I just need to verify the address. This is the address that was on the screen. And they say, no, I moved like months ago. Why is that address still there? And then then you get through the call, but then you also have to fit in there. You need to make sure to call your provider because they don't just change it. It's not like with a landline, a legacy landline. It doesn't just change when you switch. It doesn't work that way. Now you got to take the initiative to tell them, or this happens. So then I have to tell the officers because they're almost to the house, and then they have to go like back the direction that they probably were before.
The other side of the county, yeah.
Right, and they're pissed off. And I'm like, dude, it's not my fault. This is a VoIP phone. So there was a lot of issues when VoIP phones were first coming in and all. And this was, I don't know, hell, like 2007, 2008, something like that. But so for you though, with cellular phones that were coming in, I mean, was it basically the same? No location, it's all coming in weird, nothing on the screen. What was it like?
Yeah, initially I believe we could get the tower. I don't know if I'm thinking that originally it just came in. Well, it could have been phase zero. Phase zero was nothing. Phase one was the tower. And I really don't remember, because in the early days, of course, the state police got a lot of those calls, and I know they didn't have any information. And I'm just trying to remember if it was actually phase one. I remember having to use phase one information if they were trying to figure out where this call may have come from, which part of the city, or really didn't do you a whole lot of good. I laugh even today at some of these TV shows where they go, "Oh, let me push this button; it'll triangulate." Blah 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 blah. Yeah,
Like, oh, there you are.
never in the real world.
No, it's definitely getting a lot better now, and there are some companies that are getting that close. You know, they're
Oh
doing
yeah,
pretty good, but not like on TV, and not with those fancy maps and you know, all the other programs that they have on there. It's like, oh, does it really look like that? Like, no,
yeah.
it's not. I mean, some of them look cool, but it's not that accurate. Like, we're
Mm,
know your location, know your surroundings, give me some
yeah.
landmarks. Remember, look for cross streets. Always be aware of where you are at. Oh man.
And actually, I'm going to go back to LaGrange County.
Uh-huh.
That was the way you had to dispatch, because nobody had a home address. Everything was rural route 1, rural route 4. Uh, you would have people call in and needing the sheriff's department or a fire department or something that had no idea what the road number was they lived on, because we have county road numbers here.
Yeah.
They've lived on the same one for 30 years, but they don't know what it is because their mailing address is Route 1 LaGrange.
So
I actually had a woman get mad at me. She goes, "Well, the mail knows how to get to me." And I go, "Well, lady, that's a miracle within itself."
yeah, yeah,
You have to
I
catch yourself
remember.
once in a while. You can't really do that, but yeah, I did. I said, "Well, that's a miracle within itself," without even thinking about it. So I said it.
Oops. Oh,
But yeah, you had to know things like, especially with the Amish. You know, they use landmarks a lot too, even probably still today.
yeah.
I'm just a mile west of Four Woods Corner. Well, if you didn't know where Four Woods Corner was, it's actually, I believe it's State Road 5 and 400 South in LaGrange County, and there's like no woods on either 2 or 3 of those corners now.
Oh, wow.
Buttermilk Corners was the county line on 5, and that kind of stuff. The old Huff School,
Gee. Yeah.
the
So
tavern around the lakes.
we did something
Where are you
similar.
from? The Lake of the Woods Tavern. Oh yeah, I'm just down and around the curve to the east, or something like that.
And you had to know those areas. Like for me in the last dispatch center that I was in, you know, we were a central dispatch, and we dispatched for the entire county. And if it
Mm-hmm.
was on the west side of the county and people said certain things, I knew exactly where it was, what they were looking at. But on the
Mm-hmm.
east side of the county, nope. We would have to do geo rides and go around and look at, you know, see different places. You know, most of the places that people would talk about a lot, you know, we would go and we would find it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the city of Allegan, they have what is called Water Tower Hill, because there's a water tower that is on top of a hill. And and a lot of times people wouldn't know those cross streets, and they would
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm right next to Water Tower Hill. I'm like, oh, okay, I know where that's at. I know those cross streets. And then you know, I can picture it right now in my head what it looks like, and I would be able to go that way. But sometimes they would say, "Oh, you know Jeff so and so, right? Well, he lives just down from Bob's Road and
Mm-hmm.
the chicken stand." And you're like, I don't know. I don't know who that is. Like, you don't know who Jeff is? I'm like, no, I don't know.
Well, back in my early days in LaGrange County, that's just what I did. I just took
Yeah.
a county map, and I just would take a township and just drive it. First
Yeah.
of all, it was cheap entertainment because, being young, married, and not making a whole lot of money, you didn't go to the movies a lot, so we just would take a ride. Plus, it's a nice county. It's a pretty county out here. We still do that today. Just kind of
Yeah.
go and ride out through the county just to look at stuff or look at wildlife, just to as a as something to do that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And I did the same thing in Fort Wayne. That almost got me in trouble a couple of times because um, we were actually at a structure fire that we came across in uh, an apartment complex, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And we kind of stood out like a sore thumb, if you know what I'm saying. So
Oh,
we decided that maybe we probably ought to go, because we were getting some funny looks. Why
right.
these kids out here? So
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, we better just go. I did learn where that was at once I found it. So
Well, and so kind of not exactly like that, but kind of like that. There's an area in Allegan, and you know, rest this lady's soul. She's passed away now, and again, this was years ago, but she would call a lot, and she was always upset about something that was going on, and there was something that was going on between her and the city or the township, something like that. And she ended up she ended up painting like this note, like an upset note to, I can't remember if it was to law enforcement or if it was the city council or township council, something like that. And I remember people telling me about it, and they said, "You guys need to do something. Like, what do you want us to do?" Because I think it was her. It might have been her property, is what it was. And we were saying it's her property. She can do what she wants with it. And I had always wanted to see it because we would get so many calls on it. And I did a ride along one night, and I said, "Can you take me through, such and such area?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, you want to see the note?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And it sure as shit, it's right there on a fence, all painted and
Mhm.
angry and spicy. And I thought, wow. Yeah. But it was also one of those things where I was able to pinpoint certain stuff in that area based on the location of that note on the fence.
Mhm.
The things you bring.
Landmarks are a big thing, I'm telling you, because still today people don't know their address, but
This is true. Yeah, you always gotta tell people, and especially if it's like a babysitter that's there or someone who's
Mhm.
visiting and something happens where they don't know the address where they're at, think outside the box, get a piece of
Right.
mail.
Try to
Or
find a piece of mail or a magazine or
yeah, anything that might have an address on it. There's gotta be something
Mhm.
somewhere. Look at something that's tacked on the refrigerator, anything like that, or simply go outside
Right.
of the house and look at the number and tell me where you think you're at. You can get close that way. So you've got all of these years of experience in public safety in every discipline as well. You've got so many. And you told me you're like, no man, I probably don't have anything that's that interesting. All of this has been interesting. um now you're in the private sector now. You work for INdigital. um
Mhm.
you were working you're working in two different places. First, I believe it was first, you were over at the NSOC. Now what does that stand for?
Um,
It's
network, no, National Service Operations Center. I
There you
had
go.
I
Yeah,
stopped thinking what it was.
I had to think about it myself because NSOC before it
Well,
was.
it had several names. It was just the support
Yeah,
area, then it was the QRC Quality Resolution Center, and then I think it's been a
right.
couple other names, but
Yeah.
basically the troubleshooting area.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of troubleshooting and everything that goes on there and stuff. So if if something comes up, well, you explain it. You work there. What? Yeah. So it's all
Well,
just troubleshooting, or what is it that goes on in that?
well, it's the customer facing part of the company.
Yeah.
So if a customer or whether it's the director or dispatcher has an issue, that's who they would contact, and we gather all the information we can, and then look into it to see if it's something that can be readily resolved with the training that the NSOC folks have had. If not, then they escalate it to those folks that need to look at it. Um, and if it's a urgent thing, something's down, then that's where they fire off the flare and call everybody in, and, and
Right.
and we get it
That's
addressed right away. You know,
yeah.
hit the panic alarm.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that goes on there. And but you ended up moving from that spot, and now you're at a different building in a different position. And you're now a systems infrastructure specialist. So what does that even mean? Like what is it that entails? Because I think you bring a unique perspective to this position, and of course to the company as a whole, because you have worked every single discipline. So if someone is trying to, I don't know, figure something out or wrap their head around, why would you need this, or why would this have to happen this way, you have the experience of all of that public safety has to offer in that service, that you can tell them, well, this exactly is the reason. And I can tell you why. I can give you several examples and go
Hmm.
from there. I think it's amazing that they have you there because you bring that experience to the company.
So thank you. I try. Well, back when I was in the NSOC, it was beneficial to be on all sides of it. So I could know what it was like to sit in the chair and have the problem that they're addressing, or when they're trying to describe it, especially if they're not a technical person, I can understand it and maybe translate a little bit better. That helped a lot too. Um, Going into this area now, um, it's important to the fact that everything we do is involving computers and servers and networks, and you know, when you dial the 911 on your phone, there is so many computers and networks that everything has to align just perfectly to get that call delivered in milliseconds to the
Right.
PSAP. So um, it it makes me feel good to be part of that, because um, I retired from the fire department about 3 years ago, and so I don't really have a toe in the public safety anymore. Well, this still keeps a little bit of that input in public safety that kind of drives me. It's just something I've always had to do my entire life. I couldn't see never being completely disconnected from it. So this having this job and understanding its importance is helped a lot with that. Um, it's kind of accidental how I got here.
Mhm.
Um,
There's
I
supposed to be a lot of
we were well,
man.
yeah. I kind of fall into different things. I don't know what happens, or I get drug into it, one or the other. But um, after I left Fort Wayne City, I went back to LaGrange County as a jailer for a couple of years, and then I talked to a buddy of mine that was the 911 director in Noble County and was missing the public safety vibe again. I was kind of wanting to get back into dispatch, and they were hiring part-time dispatchers. So I asked him if I could work as a part-time dispatcher, and he goes, well, send in your application and we'll talk about it. And I thought, well, this is kind of strange. Okay. Because I've known the guy for like 30 years, you know.
Right.
So I sent it in, and they called me in for an interview, and I had an interview with him and the sheriff. Um, and we're sitting there talking, and again, it's not really one of those interviews. It's kind of like it was with Randy Rapole. It was like war stories and whatnot. And the sheriff looks at the 911 director and he goes, what do you think we should ask him? Well, I'm nervous now.
Oh,
I thought, what are you going to put on me? Well, anyway, they want to know if I'd take the job as a full-time dispatcher. And I really hadn't thought of that, but they presented a pretty good case for it. And turns out it would have been a step up. So then I started doing that. So I was dispatching in Noble County for a while, and they were just starting to get an IT division within the county, because they were going to upgrade uh, computers to a network version of CAD system, and I think this is when I got my first introduction to INdigital. I can't remember the gentlemen that were early on, but they were uh, just starting to build the EZNet up here in the northeast corner of the state, and Noble County was one of the places they were going to do this work. So I got introduced to them, and the um, the county needed somebody to help the IT director, who was just one man for the entire county, take care of stuff at the sheriff's department. So I was kind of split between dispatch and that, and then a year or so later doing that full time, taking care of all the computers in the jail and the dispatch and whatnot, and working with INdigital on the 911 stuff. And uh, later on, I was there for a total of 5 years. Again, looking for the more money thing, trying to uh, increase, your salary and whatnot.
yeah.
I answered an ad for computer technician for a company called Bradford Scott. Well, I interviewed with a couple of gentlemen with there, explained to them what I did, explained to them that, you know, at that time they were working heavily in Linux systems. I knew enough about Windows to be dangerous, and I told them that, but I'm willing to learn. I think it would be great. Well, they took a chance with me, and I ended up working for that company for 8 years as hardware technician. We did data processing for credit unions. And then a friend of mine that works here. I had learned that he had worked here, and we were kind of talking about it. He goes, well, I think you ought to apply here too. So I ended up applying and getting hired and starting off in the NSOC and have enjoyed it ever since.
Dang.
But I've always been upfront with everybody that when I would interview with them, this is what I know. I understand this may be more, but hey, I'm willing to learn, and I find it very interesting because the one thing in this field is it never stops. The changes, the only thing constant is the constant changing, and I've enjoyed it.
It sounds like it. Like you said, man, there's 200 years worth of public safety. I mean,
I know it sounds even scarier when I say it out loud.
every discipline of public safety, and also now on the private side, and doing things, doing a lot of troubleshooting and all for networks, and getting, making sure that these calls are going to where they're going, like you're assisting in all of that process. And like we were talking about in the beginning, before we started recording, people don't know about the back end. Even those who are answering those calls, dispatchers and call takers, a lot of them don't know. Because and I was one of those too. I was one of those, like a lot of people, and you probably might have been the same way. But my thought process was, I don't care how it works. I just want it to work. I want it to work so that I can do my job and get people the help that they need, and to get my folks out there, all that stuff. But then when switching over and working for INdigital for all those years and learning all of that back end stuff and thinking, wow, like there's way more to this. It's not just dial
It's
911.
almost awesome. It's hard to imagine that it doesn't seem like it ought to work. There's so many moving parts,
There
but
is.
it's flawless. It's just great.
Yeah, there was oh man. So there's a session. Thinking about it now, it makes me laugh. Okay, so um Mark Grady, the president of INdigital, um, he was supposed to do a session on how a phone call works from the beginning to the end. And there's actually, well, from the beginning, the caller to dispatch and how it gets there, and the moving parts, like the main pieces that go together. And there's a little skit in it. It's an hour-long session. There's a little skit in there where people are holding different signs on the different pieces for that specific call. And it's supposed to be kind of a funny thing because those who are acting in it, you're standing in front of the set of the class that are doing the session, and sometimes they'll forget who they are, and they'll kind of mess up, and that's kind of how it happens. If a call messes up, one of those parts might not be working. So it's funny to do it that way. Well, he had to fly out for an emergency meeting, and I was there doing the podcast and doing other sessions. And he says, I need you to do this session for me. And I said, oh, okay. I said, when is it supposed to happen? And he goes, in an hour. And I said, what? I said, are you serious? And he goes, yeah, you'll be fine. There's notes, and you know how this stuff works. You'll be fine. And I said, Mark, in an hour. And he goes, you'll be fine. I put myself in the corner by the bathrooms, and I had all of the different cards, and I'm looking at them, and I'm reading the skit, and I'm looking at them, and man, I went through the whole thing. It ended up being awesome. It was so much fun to do. But that alone, that is part of what people don't understand, is those missing pieces and how it moves all over the place. When you call 911, it's like that. So somebody picks up and you hear somebody. But on the back end, like we were saying, there's so many working parts. I might have to do that session on either an episode or a dispatcher's roundtable broadcast to show people, because there's a lot there as well.
Well, yes, and it's not a straight line either. There's okay, if this happens, then you do this. If this doesn't happen, then you do that, and it goes through a lot of steps just from the moment you pick up the cell phone and dial. It's still fascinating to me when some of the work I have to do requires test 911 calls, and just watching it process through the system while I'm doing it, just like it's just awe striking. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, for real. That is something else. And as we go into the wrap up of this episode, this has been awesome. Again, I'm so happy that I finally was able to get you on this. I knew that you would have that you would have a story there just based on some of the stuff that we talked about when we were working together. I don't know, it was a couple years ago that we were talking, and we
yeah, it was quite a while ago.
started it up there. What here's the last question for you. What are your thoughts on where 911 is going? Like, what do you think the future holds? There's so many things that we see coming. Location accuracy. When Google Glass came out, I saw a promo video where they showed a dispatcher seeing what was going on, and I thought, wow, that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
Google's not giving me
that's the most exciting part. I think is going to be in the future of this is, you know, somebody says, I don't know where I'm at.
Mhm.
Well, take your phone and let's just slowly do a 360 so I can see where you're at. Or uh, trying to determine whether someone's, if an accident is really serious or not. Well, can I see that? Or being able, the other parts of that is not only the dispatcher is now they're getting technology developed to where the police officers in the field will be able to see what the caller is seeing. You know, if you got a prowler outside the house and they got their phone camera where they can actually show you where the prowler's at. There's just stuff like that. It's mind blowing. It's just it's one step away from beam me up Scotty or teleporting.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much coming, and I am excited. I'm very
I am
excited
too.
to see how everything ends up playing out in the future. And well, not even that far in the future. Like there's stuff that's already happening now, man, and that is fascinating as well. Um, Thank you again so much for being on, man. This has been awesome. It has been a
Well,
pleasure,
thank you for having me.
and just to hear your history, your story, and yeah, from the beginning till now. It's a long journey, but it has been, from what it sounds like, a very eventful and resourceful. And man, it's in your blood. You're in it, and that's awesome. Thank you for everything, for what you've done,
Thank you.
continue to do in public safety. I will be right back with you here. For those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that'll be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Let me throw that up here really quick. Once again, wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is going to be at 911 Podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast. This episode has been an INdigital exclusive and also sponsored by INdigital and Rapid Deploy. And this show will always be free, but if you are looking for any bonus content, behind the scenes series, singing badly in my car, the early episode releases ad free, as well as discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, all types of stuff like that. Check us out on patreon.com/WTT podcast. Again, I wouldn't be able to do this without patrons, sponsors, and all of you who watch, listen, and support. So thank you so much. I appreciate it more than you know. This video episode can be seen on Facebook as well as YouTube. And then the audio portion of this for Within the Trenches podcast, the flagship show of the Code 7 Podcast Network, can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone.